Are you looking to move to Annapolis, Maryland and looking for waterfront? Watch this video and let me give you 5 tips before you make any decisions. All right, what's up everybody? My name is Rob Schou and I'm with eXp in Maryland. And if you're looking to buy waterfront and you need help as a buyer, make sure you use that contact information below. Call me, text me, and I'd be happy to help you. I love helping people move down to Southern Maryland and the Western Shore of Maryland, and I love the water, so I'd be happy to help you do that. If you want, you don't even have to call me. You can scroll down to the first comment, click on the link, and one-on-one, we can have a Zoom meeting about your waterfront home buying needs. And last but not least, if you find this content helpful, make sure you scroll down, click the subscribe button, click the little bell so you're notified every single time we put out new content. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk today about what it means to buy waterfront in Annapolis, Maryland. Now, I grew up in Annapolis. I grew up actually outside of downtown Annapolis, right about 10 minutes outside of it, in a community called Hillsmere. I had a nice community marina and I loved being there. So my love of the water started in Annapolis, in Hillsmere, and since that day, that I really started going down to, we called it the sand spit, I never stopped wanting to be and wanting to live on the water. Now that's taken me to Southern Maryland, where I live now. I don't live in Annapolis anymore, but I've always wanted to be on the water, and I love helping people find that same thing. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to go over 5 things. We're going to talk about locations to look for waterfront in Annapolis. We're going to talk about regulations of owning waterfront and what that means for you when you're in Annapolis and in Anne Arundel County. We're going to talk about what activities are awesome for the area of Annapolis. We're going to talk about the housing types you're going to find in different areas of Annapolis. And we're also going to answer some frequently asked questions that I always get when I'm talking to people about waterfront in Annapolis and in other areas too. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to use Google Maps and Google Earth to kind of go through this and just kind of talk to you about the different areas. There are so many little communities, there are so many little nooks and crannies around Annapolis that if I were to go into detail of every single creek and every single tributary of each river, it literally would be a 20-30 minute video. So I'll go through it generally. If you see an area you like or you want more information, comment down below, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to specifically respond to those areas. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about, and we're going to go from south to north. So we're going to start with the South River, and that kind of borders the southern side of Annapolis. You can see it on the map I'm showing you right now. And when we talk about Annapolis and the creeks that go with Annapolis on the South River, there's 5 main creeks. There's Duval Creek, there's Harness Creek, there's Aberdeen Creek, there's Crab Creek, and there's Church Creek. So I kind of went through, and you can see them on the screen right now. And they all have their plus and minuses. If you want to be closer to the bay, you can choose a creek that's closer to the bay. If you want to be closer upriver, to the restaurants and that Route 2 bridge in that area, you can always be a little bit closer. But the nice thing is, it's a pretty small area. I can remember actually living in Hillsmere, taking my paddle boat all the way up to the South River when I was like 12 or 13 years old. So it's not a huge area. It does see some boat traffic on the weekends, but it's like a wide open area where you have to worry about being in a smaller boat or going long distance. All right, and so then to the north, you're looking at the Severn River. So the Severn River is where downtown Annapolis, Ego Alley, all that quintessential Annapolis kind of area is. But you also have Spa Creek, which is, right in that downtown area. Then you have College Creek, and you have Weems Creek. And College Creek and Weems Creek are closer to the United States Naval Academy. But those are the 2 main areas that you're looking at if you're looking for true Annapolis, waterfront. So South River and its tributaries, and the Severn River and its tributaries. Now, like I said before, there are so many different communities. There are so many different, housing areas on those 2 rivers. For me to go over each and every single community, it would take literally multiple videos. But those are the areas you kind of want to narrow down. I don't really have a favorite. I guess I do have a favorite. I grew up on the South River. I really enjoy the South River. It's a little less crowded. I love fishing and crabbing and stuff on the South River. But people love living on the Severn River too. It's one of the greatest sailing rivers there is. It's closer to the Bay Bridge. It's close to downtown Annapolis, of course, and people love going to those areas. So it really is a personal choice of where you want to look. and where you want to choose. Now I'm going to kind of go out of order. The second thing I'm going to talk about is housing types. And again, it's the same thing. Because there's so much waterfront and because Annapolis is so huge, there's so many different choices of how you can enjoy the water and what kind of house you can have when you're going to be on the water in Annapolis. I look at listings all the time for that area, and it goes from detached single family homes and townhomes and in neighborhoods that I grew up in that just have a huge community waterfront. So there's so many different options to go in there and say, this is the only thing that's available in Annapolis and this is what you're looking for. It's not. It really is just like a plethora of choices that you could choose. Now the one caveat, and I know this because I lived in Hillsmere at the time when this was going on. Sometimes when you're in a community of a certain age, if it already has a marina there, you might be limited if you can put a pier or not on your own property. So if there's already a community marina with boat slips, there is a law on the books that says riparian rights may not be granted to those other waterfront owners. Now there is a big whole lawsuit with it that I'm not 100% familiar with it, but when you go look at these houses, especially if it's in a community and it doesn't already have a pier, make sure you ask tons of questions before you jump in and say, hey, I want this place, I can put a pier right here. No. You might not be able to. And so going from housing types, let's go to the third thing, and these are the regulations. Like I said, one of the biggest regulations that I'm concerned of when I start talking to people at homes in Annapolis is making sure that they're allowed to have a pier, that the community association, the community regulations allow you to have a pier. But then kind of going even on a bigger lens, you got to think about Maryland and the critical area. Now, if you're not familiar with the critical area, the state of Maryland kind of regulates what you can do within 1,000 feet of any Chesapeake Bay tributary and the amount of land you can disturb and all other types of stuff. So be aware of that, because you can't just put an addition on a place without going through a pretty lengthy process to make sure you're not impacting the environment around the Chesapeake Bay negatively. And it gets even more strict the closer you get to the water, and right when you get to 100 feet of the water, it's called a buffer zone, and that's kind of like a no-touch zone where you're not really supposed to build anything. You can maintain the structures that are there, but for a lot of times now they don't issue new permits, to put structures down there. You can't really touch the vegetation unless it's an existing like lawn where you're cutting the grass and stuff like that. So you just really got to know what you're going into and what you have on that property, so you know what you can and can't do. Now, the one exception to really building in the buffer is a pier. They'll let you build a pier on almost any property. Anne Arundel County has more lenient setbacks than a lot of other places. So setbacks are, when you're thinking about your pier, you can't really be within 15 feet of someone else's property line when you're building that pier. And the property lines extend out to the water, and they're called lateral lines. And Anne Arundel County is pretty lenient. Like I said, they're about 15 feet. So that makes it so a lot that has, about 35 feet of waterfront, depending on the lines go out into the water, could technically have a pier. There are other ways that if you have a smaller waterfront or your lines actually cross out into the water, that you can apply for variances and other stuff, because it is your riparian right, according to Maryland, to be able to access the water on that pier. So that's a whole nother ball of wax that you could get into. But before you even go down that road, ask the questions when you're at that waterfront, waterfront home. And if you don't get the answers you want, ask someone else. Talk to a lawyer, talk to planning and zoning, do that work, or talk to a different real estate agent too, because there's lots of things that go into buying waterfront, and you want to get it right the first time, because it can be a headache if you don't. All right, so now Annapolis, as far as like what activities you can do, it's really endless. Annapolis is probably the best set up city for doing waterfront things in Maryland. It's got everything from downtown Annapolis, where you're just, surrounded by some of the best shopping in Anne Arundel County, and you have, you can go sightsee and do all that kind of stuff, go see the Naval Academy, go to all the different restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And you can also skip down to the South River, and really, I think that's the start of some really beautiful water of the Chesapeake Bay, where some of the best crabbing, some great rock fishing, some great, some of my favorite perch fishing, it's just right at your fingertips too. So, it really is a great place to do all different types of activities. Now, I will say this, it's not the best place to be fishing and crabbing and boating and all that kind of stuff if you don't like other people being around you when you're doing it. because it's close to Annapolis, because it's close to those population centers, there's a lot of people out there wanting to do the same thing you're doing. And for the most part, people are really respectful. And I never had too many issues, but I can remember back to some times when I'd be fishing out there and it just felt like you were playing bumper boats with people, especially when the bite was really good. And that just wasn't my cup of tea. Now, you can avoid that kind of stuff by going out on weekdays or going out on evenings, but it can be a little more crowded than other areas of the bay. All right, so the number 5 thing I wanted to talk about was frequently asked questions. One of the biggest things I get asked all the time is about flood insurance, because there's so many different properties in Annapolis, flood insurance is really kind of hard to pin down unless you're looking at the individual property. If you want, you can go on and look at the different flood maps through FEMA. It can give you an idea of the zone, like zone AE, and then it normally is a number after that, which kind of tells you like what the flood elevation is. But I really think the best thing to do is to go to your insurance provider, whoever has your homeowner's insurance policy, and tell them the address of the home you're looking to buy, or you're even going to look at, and get a quote. Know what you're going up against, know what that cost is going to be so you can factor it in so it's not a surprise a few weeks down the road when you've already made an offer. Just know what you're getting into. For the most part, like I've lived in now 3 different houses that have required flood insurance. Most of them have been in kind of lower risk flood areas, and my policies were between that $500 and $800 range a year. But I have had neighbors, and I know people that had older homes that were really low to the water, or maybe were in more flood prone areas, that have said they've had a $3,000 policy quote. I just really recommend, no matter what, if you just are starting your search and maybe you just have a handful of ones, send them to your insurance agent, send those addresses, figure out what those quotes are, just so you have a better idea of what your budget is when you're looking for waterfront. All right, so another thing is, I get a lot of people, especially Annapolis waterfront prices, it is so expensive, and how can they even afford waterfront with those kind of prices? Be creative. Look for homes that are close to marinas. There are so many different marinas around Annapolis that you can find homes that are close to marinas. And while that means, you have to share waterfront, you still have access and you can still live that waterfront life. And some of those marinas have restaurants and pools and all that kind of stuff. And it can be a cool resort kind of feel that you get to go and do. You can also do what I did as a kid, of course, and live in a neighborhood that has its own marina. Now, I will say I can remember that the wait list for slips and stuff there were measured in years, not months, and sometimes it was 5 to 10 years just opening up a slip. But there was a boat ramp in our community, so it did make it easier too. But those would be my kind of suggestions if you're looking for waterfront living at a more affordable price. All right, so hopefully these 5 tips were helpful when you're looking for waterfront in Annapolis. If you have any questions about waterfront or need any help, make sure you use that contact information below. Call me, text me, and I'd be happy to help you with your move. And if you want, you can scroll down to the first comment, click on the link, and schedule a Zoom meeting one-on-one with me so we can go over your home buying needs. And last but not least, if you have not yet, make sure you scroll down, click the subscribe button, click the little bell so you're notified every time we put out new content. Hope to see you on the next video.